The doctor's fingers trembled slightly as she held my medical chart, her eyes fixed not on the glowing ultrasound display where my baby's tiny heart pulsed rhythmically in shades of gray, but on the forms clipped neatly inside. She hesitated for a moment, then reached over and flicked off the screen abruptly, as if severing a lifeline. The room fell into an unnatural silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. I remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the white walls lined with posters about prenatal care and healthy pregnancies. My hand instinctively went to my belly, protective, as if I could shield the little life inside from whatever storm was brewing in that small, sterile space. "Mrs. Caldwell," she murmured, her tone so low it barely carried across the exam room, laced with the urgency that made my stomach twist. "We need to have a private conversation. Immediately." She guided me down the hall to her private office, her steps quick and clipped on the linoleum floor, the door clicking shut behind us with a finality that echoed in my chest. I clutched my purse tighter, the leather strap digging into my palm, convinced something was terribly wrong with the pregnancy. My mind spiraled through a whirlwind of nightmares, genetic abnormalities, developmental complications, the kind of heartbreaking losses I'd read about in late-night online forums when sleep evaded me. The office was cozy in a clinical way, a desk cluttered with medical journals, a potted fern wilting slightly in the corner, family photos on the shelves showing smiling children and a husband in hiking gear. But as she locked the door and turned to face me, her expression wasn't one of detached medical concern. It was something deeper, more personal pity mixed with resolve. Her eyes wide and her lips pressed into a thin line. "You have to leave your husband today," she said, her words landing like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "Contact a divorce attorney before you even step foot back in your house." I stared at her, a nervous laugh bubbling up from my chest, high and brittle, echoing off the walls. It was absurd, wasn't it? "What? That doesn't make any sense. We're expecting a child. Things are good between us." "I don't." My voice trailed off as I searched her face for some sign that this was a misunderstanding, a joke in poor taste. But her expression remained grave, unyielding. "That's precisely the issue," she interrupted, her face draining of color, turning as pale as the starched coat she wore. She sank into her chair, gesturing for me to sit opposite her, but I remained standing, my legs locked in place. "What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you believe about your relationship. But to make it clear, I need to go back to how this all began. Please, sit down. This is going to take a while, and you deserve to hear it all. My name is Amelia Harper." And at that moment, I was 34 years old, a creative director at a boutique advertising agency in the heart of Boston, Massachusetts. My days were filled with brainstorming sessions in glass-walled conference rooms, pitching campaigns to clients over artisanal coffee, and late nights tweaking designs on my laptop while the city lights twinkled outside my office window. I thrived on the chaos of deadlines and the thrill of seeing my ideas come to life on billboards and social media feeds. But beneath that professional veneer, I came from what folks delicately referred to as established wealth. My great-aunt, Beatrice, had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving me her considerable fortune, around $3.5 million tucked away in a secure investment fund, along with the sprawling Harper family manor, a grand Victorian estate on the outskirts of the city where 6 generations of our line had laughed, argued, raised children, and weathered life's storms. The house was more than bricks and mortar. It was a living archive of family history, with creaking oak floors that remembered dances from the 1920s, a library filled with leather-bound books collected over centuries, and gardens that bloomed with heirloom roses planted by my ancestors. I never made a show of the inheritance. I earned my own way, drove a beat-up old Volvo that had seen better days, and grabbed my daily latte from the corner shop like anyone else, chatting with the barista about the weather or the latest Red Sox game. The money was a safety net, a quiet assurance that allowed me to pursue my passions without fear, not the core of who I was. But, as I would soon learn, it painted a bullseye on my back, invisible to me but glaring to those with sharper, more predatory eyes. I first crossed paths with Ethan Caldwell 3 years ago at an art auction my family had organized for charity. The Harpers had been behind these events for decades, a tradition started by my great-grandfather to support local artists and community programs. That particular evening, the venue was an elegant gallery downtown, with high ceilings and spotlights illuminating vibrant canvases and sculptures. Soft jazz played in the background, mingling with the murmur of conversations and the clink of wine glasses. I was lingering near the refreshment table, a glass of Chardonnay in hand, dodging a persistent suitor, a middle-aged banker type with a too-perfect haircut who'd somehow steered our chat from the artwork to my investment portfolio in under 2 minutes. His questions were veiled but obvious, probing for details about my financial standing under the guise of casual interest. I was smiling politely, nodding along, but inside I was plotting my escape, scanning the room for a familiar face or an excuse to slip away. Then Ethan materialized out of the crowd, tall and lean, with sandy blonde hair that caught the light and a disarming grin that seemed to light up his hazel eyes. He was dressed sharply but not ostentatiously, a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, giving off an air of effortless confidence. He approached the table, poured himself a glass of sparkling water, and turned to me with that easy smile. "Tough crowd tonight," he said, nodding toward the banker who had just wandered off. "What are you drinking? Mind if I join you in escaping the small talk?" He asked about my drink choice without waiting for an answer, then cracked a light-hearted quip about one of the overpriced abstract paintings on display, a swirling mess of colors that looked like a toddler's finger painting but was valued at 5 figures. Not once did he probe about finances or drop hints about his own status. He introduced himself as an investment consultant who'd snagged a last-minute ticket through a work buddy, claiming he hadn't a clue about the Harper legacy or the prominence of the event's hosts. In hindsight, that was warning sign number one, glaring and neon. An investment guy not vetting the hosts of a high-profile fundraiser. That's like a pilot showing up to fly a plane without checking the weather report or fuel levels. It's basic due diligence, the kind of thing professionals in his field do instinctively. But I was weary of the blatant fortune hunters, the ones who saw dollar signs in my last name before they even learned my first. And here was this engaging stranger, chatting about my favorite novels. I'd mentioned loving classic literature like Jane Austen and F. Scott Fitzgerald instead of my net worth or trust fund details. We talked for hours that night, or at least it felt that way amid the ebb and flow of the auction. He shared stories from his travels, a backpacking trip through Europe after college, where he'd gotten lost in the winding streets of Prague and ended up at a local pub sharing beers with strangers, a weekend hike in the Appalachians that had left him with blisters but unforgettable sunrises. He asked about my work, genuinely interested in the creative process behind advertising campaigns, laughing at my anecdotes about finicky clients who changed their minds mid-project. By the end of the evening, as the last bids were called and the crowd thinned, he asked for my number with a shy grin, promising to text about a book recommendation I'd made. I gave it to him without hesitation, feeling a spark I hadn't felt in years, a genuine connection, or so I thought. We dated for 8 months, a whirlwind of dinners at cozy bistros, walks along the Charles River, where we'd watch the rowers glide by under the autumn leaves, and lazy Sundays in my apartment, binge-watching old movies. Ethan was considerate in ways that felt thoughtful, rather than calculated, remembering the little things, like how I preferred my tea with a splash of milk and no sugar, or the anniversary of my first big client win at the agency, which he celebrated with a surprise picnic in the park. He made a point of covering our dates, insisting on picking up the tab even though I could have afforded 10 times over without blinking. It wasn't about the money for him, he said. It was about showing he cared, about being the provider in those small moments. He came across as authentic, grounded, the kind of man who valued substance over flash. But my father, Reginald Harper, spotted the facade right away. Dodd was a retired engineer, sharp and no nonsense, with a lifetime of experience reading people from boardrooms to construction sites. After their initial encounter, a casual dinner at a steakhouse where Ethan had charmed the waiter and ordered for the table, Dad cornered me in the kitchen as we cleared plates. "That fellow's charm is all surface," he warned, his voice low and serious, bushy eyebrows furrowed. "There's a coldness there, Amelia, behind the smiles and the stories. Something doesn't add up. Trust me on this, I've seen his type before." I brushed it off as overprotectiveness, maybe even a touch of envy that I was building my own life independent of the family shadow. Dad had always been cautious, especially after Mom passed away from cancer when I was in college, leaving him to navigate parenthood alone. We'd clashed over Ethan endlessly in those early months, Dad questioning his background, his job stability, his intentions, me defending him as the real deal, accusing Dad of being paranoid or unable to let go. The arguments escalated, words like jealous and overprotective thrown around until our communication dwindled to sparse holiday messages and occasional check-in calls. 2 years of distance from the man who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike in the manor's driveway, and cheered at my graduation, the man who'd sacrificed his own dreams to ensure mine flourished, all because I sided with a stranger over family. Plot twist: Dad was spot on, his instincts honed like a blade, and he's more than due for an "I warned you." But even now, as I reflect on it, I know he wouldn't rub it in. That's not his way. He's the type to offer a quiet hug and move forward. Lessons learned in silence. Ethan and I tied the knot after those 8 months, a stunning affair at the Harper Manor. The estate transformed into a fairy tale venue with twinkling lights strung through the ancient oaks, white tents on the manicured lawns, and a string quartet playing classical pieces as guests arrived. The ceremony was held in the rose garden, petals scattering underfoot like confetti from nature itself. Ethan wept during the vows, tears tracing down his cheeks as he promised eternal love, protection, and partnership, his voice breaking on words like forever and soulmate. Back then, I saw raw emotion, a man overwhelmed by joy. Now, I recognize the calculation behind it. The relief that his elaborate scheme was finally locking into place, the pieces falling together after months of careful maneuvering. The reception was lavish but tasteful, catered by a local chef with farm-tote dishes, a dance floor under the stars where we swayed to our first song, an old jazz standard that Ethan had claimed was his grandmother's favorite. Guests toasted to our future, clinking glasses filled with champagne, and I felt on top of the world, surrounded by love and promise. Both marriage settled into a rhythm, mornings sharing coffee in our cozy townhouse, evenings cooking together or attending industry events where Ethan networked with ease. But after 18 months of fruitless attempts to conceive, naturally tracking cycles, temperature charts, the whole exhausting routine, we consulted a fertility specialist in a sleek clinic downtown. The verdict was crushing. Delivered in a softly lit office with sympathetic nods, Ethan suffered from profound male infertility. His motility was negligible, count virtually zero, the doctor explained with charts and statistics that blurred before my eyes. Biological kids without medical intervention, out of the question, a near-zero probability that left us both reeling. Ethan appeared heartbroken, sobbing in the parking lot for half an hour as rain pattered on the car roof, begging forgiveness as if it were his fault alone, his shoulders shaking with what I took for genuine grief. I held him close, my own tears mixing with his, assuring him we'd navigate it as partners, that love wasn't defined by biology. That's marriage, right? Facing the hard truths together, building a path forward. Unbeknownst to me, those tears weren't from sorrow, they were from the wrench thrown into his meticulously laid plans, the need to adapt on the fly. He was already pivoting, recalculating angles, not grieving the loss of a dream but adjusting the conduct. We opted for IVF with a specialized technique called TIA, where surgeons extract viable sperm directly from the tissue for injection into the eggs. It was invasive, expensive, but our best shot at parenthood. Ethan took charge of vetting clinics, spending hours online and on calls, selecting one he deemed ideal, a state-of-the-art facility in a neighboring town, with glowing reviews and cutting-edge tech. He managed the forms, the scheduling, the insurance wrangles, insisting it was his way of contributing amid my emotional exhaustion from hormone shots and endless appointments. I figured he was stepping up, being the rock I needed. The initial round flopped after weeks of hope-negative test, a void that left me shattered, spending days in bed staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. Ethan comforted me through it, holding me as I cried, whispering vows to persist, that our family was worth every trial. 6 months back, the second try succeeded against all odds. That double line on the pregnancy test in our bathroom, under the warm glow of the vanity lights, brought floods of joy, tears streaming as I called Ethan at work, his whoop of excitement echoing through the phone. He rushed home with flowers and takeout from my favorite Thai place, embracing me tightly, babbling about crib designs in soft pastels, potential names like Oliver for a boy or Sophia for a girl, the life he'd envisioned since our first date. Then, offhandedly one evening, as we sat on the couch watching a documentary, he suggested revising my estate plans now that we were expanding our family. "It's just smart, Amelia," he said, his hand on my knee. "With the baby coming, we should make sure everything's protected. Add me to the fund access, update the will, practical stuff." It seemed prudent, caring, the kind of forward-thinking a devoted husband does. Little did I know he was eyeing Beatrice's legacy as his personal bailout, the dollars signs glittering in his mind like the city skyline at night. Life felt idyllic in those early months of pregnancy, morning sickness tempered by Ethan's gentle care, bringing me ginger tea and crackers, ultrasound appointments where we'd marvel at the grainy images, his hand squeezing mine, the doting spouse, the impending parenthood, the fairy tale I'd imagined since childhood games in the Manor's orchards, pretending my dolls were a happy family. I couldn't foresee that, in mere weeks, a doctor with unsteady hands would unveil papers torching my illusion, ignited by the very man sharing my bed, his breath even and unsuspecting as he slept beside me. But as the pregnancy progressed to 4 months, subtle shifts crept into our dynamic. Red flags I rationalized because facing the alternative reality hurt too much, like ripping off a bandage from a wound not yet healed. Ethan's phone stayed screen down constantly on every surface: the nightstand, the kitchen counter, the coffee table, its notifications silenced. A new pin changed without mention or explanation. He'd slip out to the balcony or the garage for calls, returning with vague client matters excuses before diverting the conversation to dinner plans or weekend errands. Late-night discussions at odd hours, like 10 p.m. on a Friday. He claimed urgent portfolio adjustments for high-net-worth individuals who operated on international time zones. But markets close on weekends, the trading floors dark and quiet, unless he had phantom overseas dealings, which he didn't, as far as I knew from glancing at his work emails when he left his laptop open. His office hours stretched endlessly, for 5 nights weekly, home past midnight with the scent of takeout or cologne lingering on his clothes. Investment consulting isn't round-the-clock emergency surgery. It's meetings, analyses, reports, not the kind of job that demands burning the midnight oil unless something else was afoot. Receipts surfaced in his jacket pockets or the car glove compartment, a lavish bistro I'd never visited. Dala 354-2 with wine pairings and dessert, a boutique and 30 miles away in a quaint suburb, the kind of place with fireplaces in every room and breakfast in bed. Why a local hotel when our home was comfortable and close? His replies flowed seamlessly, practiced like lines from a script. Key client schmooze, session ceiling, a big deal over steak, seminar overrun, too tired to drive back safely, better to crash there than risk it. Press further, asking for details or names, and he'd snap, his voice sharpening like a knife edge. Amelia, you're overreacting. Blame the pregnancy swings. Hormones can make anyone irrational. Dad mentioned this to me once, how expectant moms get these paranoid phases. Don't become that suspicious type, the one who checks receipts and questions everything. I'd feel a wave of guilt crash over me for doubting, apologize even, my voice small as I backed down. He excelled at gaslighting, twisting my legitimate concerns into personal flaws, making me question my own sanity. It was a masterclass in manipulation, subtle and insidious, leaving me second-guessing every intuition. The money talks escalated in frequency and intensity, like a drumbeat building to a crescendo. Add me to the fund access. What if labor goes wrong? Something happens to you. I need to be able to provide for the kid immediately, without red tape. Joint power of attorney is standard for couples. It shows trust. You needn't unless you don't have that in me. The Manor's oversized for just us 3. It's a money pit with maintenance and taxes. Sell it and let me invest the proceeds wisely. No prime opportunities in emerging markets that could double our returns in a few years. Sell Beatrice's home, the place where I'd spent summers running through the halls, where family portraits lined the walls telling stories of resilience and love, to the guy who couldn't recall which streaming app had his favorite series, mixing up Netflix and Hulu every time. No chance, not in a million years. My refusals, delivered gently at first, with explanations about sentimental value and long-term security, turned him icy, his warmth evaporating like mist in the sun. He'd withdraw affection, edging to the bed's far side at night, citing my restlessness from the pregnancy as the reason, though his snores told a different story. Fights brewed over the fund and the Manor. He'd sulk in silence for days, the house heavy with unspoken tension, until hunger or necessity broke the spell. His principles apparently hunger-dependent, thawing over a shared meal where he'd act as if nothing had happened. Intimacy waned to nothing. He cited caution for the baby, not wanting to risk any complications, his tone solicitous on the surface, but it felt like dismissal in my bones, a rejection that stung deeper than words. I'd broach it tentatively over breakfast or in the quiet of evening, suggesting we reconnect, and he'd label me clingy, erratic, demanding too much amid his stress. You're being needy, Emilie, it's the hormones talking. Give it time. Things will normalize after the birth. I began questioning myself, staring in the mirror at my changing body, the swell of my belly, the fullness in my face, and wondering if I was the problem, if pregnancy had made me undesirable or unreasonable. 1:03 a.m. The house silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. He was absent from bed. I padded downstairs in my robe, the wood steps cool underfoot, and found him in the study, hunched over his phone under the desk lamp's glow, whispering urgently, "Soon enough, by summer, it'll all wrap up. Patience is key, just a few more months." The words hung in the air like smoke. He spotted me in the doorway, his face flickering with surprise before smoothing into concern, and ended the call abruptly. "Urgent deal with the client in Asia time differences. You know, back to sleep. Love, you need your rest." I didn't probe who plots at dawn about seasonal resolutions or what wrapping up meant. Too drained from insomnia and morning sickness, too swollen with the weight of the baby, too invested in maintaining the facade of our marriage. I nodded, turned away, but the seed of doubt took root that night, burrowing deep. My close friend Lena, a graphic designer I'd met in art school, visited for brunch the following weekend. We sat on the patio, the spring sun filtering through the leaves, as I plated eggs and toast. She listened patiently as I defended Ethan's stresses, career demands, pushing him to the limit. Fatherhood jitters manifesting in odd ways, the adjustment to our changing life. Her fork paused midair as I rambled, excuses piling up like autumn leaves. Then she fixed me with that knowing gaze from our university days, the one that cut through bullshit like a hot knife. "Amelia, hear yourself out loud. This isn't you, the confident woman who pitches to Fortune 500 execs without breaking a sweat. When did you last have a real talk with your dad?" Months, years, silence from me, my eyes dropping to my plate. "And when was Ethan truly thrilled to see you walk through the door? Not just performing for company or putting on the happy husband act, but genuinely lighting up because it's you." More silence, the weight of her words pressing down. "Follow your instincts, girl. This isn't right, something's off, and you know it deep down." I dismissed her as exaggerated, a drama queen from our theater elective days, but insomnia followed that conversation like a shadow. I'd lie awake, the ceiling fan worry above, replaying Ethan's secrecy, the financial fixation that bordered on obsession, the detached stares he'd give me. The routine stare of 4 months was meant to be unremarkable, a quick check-in, so I saw the substitute very involved. Then I looked for had an unmissable meeting with a contradictory client. There's a the clinic was busy that day. Gel applied cold on my belly, probe gliding smoothly, chit-chat flowing. "How are you feeling? Any unusual symptoms? Is the baby active, kicks or flutters yet?" Then she scanned the chart on her computer, eyed Ethan's name listed as spouse, and recoiled as if burned. Her hands shook visibly as she powered down the machine, the screen going black with a soft click. "Mrs. Caldwell, we need a private talk now. Please, follow me." Her office door locked with a turn of the key. I sat, heart hammering, visions of fetal distress or anomalies flashing. "But instead, I know your husband's actions and evidence exists to prove it all." She produced a thick binder from her desk drawer, labeled with tabs and filled with printouts. "My cousin Sarah is an admin at the fertility center. You used the one your husband specifically chose. A month ago, she confided in me, distraught and in tears. Seeing your file today, with his name, it all clicked into place." Elena detailed the confession with steady voice, though her hands betrayed lingering tremors. Sarah had arrived at Elena's apartment late one night, a bottle of wine in hand but untouched, her eyes red from crying. The guilt had been gnawing at her for months, a constant companion that stole her sleep and appetite. 7 months back, a patient, spouse charming, polished, exuding desperation wrapped in reason, had approached her in the clinic parking lot after hours. He claimed a delicate family matter, opting for donor material due to hereditary risks he didn't want to burden his wife with, sparing her the emotional toll. It was all above board, he assured, just needing discretion to keep the peace. Offered $40,000 for her silence and assistance, a life-changing sum for Sarah. Buried in debts from nursing school loans, credit cards maxed from unexpected car repairs, and a salary of $55,000 that barely covered rent in the city. She caved under the pressure, the promise of relief, too tempting to refuse. Sarah facilitated the swap. Ethan's non-viable sample replaced with a donor's in the lab. The lab tech was involved too, bribed separately with a similar payout. The switch was seamless, undetectable in the routine processes.